Today, we're going to tackle the story of the world's most important and probably most dysfunctional economic marriage. We hear about rivalry and conflict every single day, but the reality? It's way more complicated and far more connected than you might think. Let's get into it.
So, picture this. It's 2025, and the headlines are just screaming at you.
You hear about the ongoing trade wars.
You see reports of escalating chip bans. And you're watching news of these tense military drills in the South China Sea. But, behind all that noise, there's this story of deep connection that almost no one is really talking about.
Let's just start with the sheer scale of this thing. Together, the United States and China, they account for a staggering 42% of the entire global economy. I mean, think about it. One is the world's biggest spender, the other is the world's biggest maker. And that simple fact, well, it underpins everything else we're going to talk about.
Okay, so this brings us to the first part of our story, the part you already know, right? The official narrative of a great power rivalry.
From Washington's perspective, China is the biggest strategic threat of the century, period. And from Beijing's perspective, the United States is this declining power, desperately trying to contain China's rise. This is the official story you hear everywhere. But it's only half the picture.
Because, and this is the key, despite all the tough talk, the United States remains profoundly dependent on China's economy. And the depth of these ties, it might actually surprise you. Even after years of tariffs and all these trade disputes, China is still the undisputed factory of the world. And to prove it, just look at this one staggering statistic. China manufactures 80% of the world's air conditioners. Yeah, think about that next time you feel a cool breeze indoors. And it goes so much further than that. We're talking 70% of the world's smartphones, over 60% of America's imported pharmaceuticals, and a stunning 90% of the rare earth elements that are essential for everything from your iPhone to an F-35 fighter jet. It's not just about what we Americans buy. It's about what American companies sell over there. I mean, titans like Apple, Tesla, and Nike, they depend on the Chinese market for a massive chunk of their global revenue. For Tesla, its Shanghai Gigafactory isn't just big, it's its most profitable plant in the world. If the Chinese consumer vanished overnight, the S&P 500 would absolutely go into a nosedive. But, and this is crucial, this whole codependent relationship is a two-way street. For all of its industrial might, China has its own critical dependencies on the United States and its allies. And nowhere is this more obvious than with semiconductors. I mean, despite pouring billions into its domestic industry, China still lags years behind. Its top chipmaker, SMIC, can produce a 7-nanometer chip. Meanwhile, companies in the US-led ecosystem like TSMC and NVIDIA, they're shipping chips at 3 and even 2 nanometers. That isn't just a gap, folks. That's a technological chasm. So here's the bottom line on this two-way street of vulnerability. China absolutely needs US allied technology for those cutting-edge chips and, just as important, the software to design them. But at the same time, the US and its allies rely on China for the rare earth elements needed to build those chips and for the vast capacity to manufacture all the older, legacy chips that still run our cars and appliances. And then there's food. This is a stark reality. China has 20% of the world's population, but only 7% of its farmable land. It simply cannot feed itself without massive imports of things like soybeans and corn, and a whole lot of that comes from the United States. A true decoupling could actually lead to a domestic food crisis in China. So, we have this intense rivalry on one hand, and this deep mutual dependence on the other. How on earth do we make sense of it? Well, this brings us to the strategy that's actually playing out behind the scenes: de-risking. This leads us to the pivotal question we've been building towards this whole time. If they need each other so much, why all the public hostility? And the answer is surprisingly simple, and it's deeply human. Washington doesn't like relying on a strategic rival for critical medicines, and Beijing hates being just one export ban away from having its tech ambitions completely throttled. This mutual feeling of vulnerability is what fuels the conflict. And that is why the real strategy isn't decoupling, a word you hear all the time. It's de-risking. It's really a global shift in mindset. We're moving away from these hyper-efficient, just-in-time supply chains to more resilient, just-in-case systems. It's about building buffers, not burning bridges. So what's the endgame here?
Ultimately, it means the entire world has a stake in how these two giants manage their very, very complicated relationship. The next time you hear a politician promise to just cut China off completely, remember this. The economic fallout would be catastrophic. It would tank global markets, cause massive inflation, and cripple entire industries in both countries. Neither side truly wants that.
This is probably the best way to think about it. They may not trust each other, they may not even like each other, but the United States and China are two giants stuck together in a very small boat. And if one of them rocks it too hard, everybody drowns.
And that leaves us with the critical question for the decade ahead. As both sides are actively trying to de-risk their economies, is a true decoupling, a real economic separation, actually possible? Or are they stuck in this boat for good? That, right there, is the real story to watch.